I walked around and saw a bunch of different ways that people found the answer to this. Somebody tell me the answer for the first one, A? Yep. $7.20 for 24 apples. People found it all kinds of different ways. One of the methods that I saw was somebody noticed that if you have 6 groups, like imagine the 4 apples comes in a bag. So you buy 6 bags, that would be 24 apples, right? So if you just multiply by 6, you get the answer. 1.2 or $1.20 times 6 gives you, how many people did it that way or something like that? Yeah, see a lot of people, very good. A lot of people did it like this. They did $1.20 divided by 4. What does that give? What does that give you? 0.30, which is 30 cents. Very good. Yeah, nice. $0.3 to 30 cents. And what is that? That has a special name. It's per what? Like what? Good. Just even in your own words, what is it? It's the price per apple. It's the price of one apple. Thomas, you remember what that special name is? Unit rate. We call that a unit rate in math class. We're not even doing unit rates today. We're not worrying about that. But that is something that, you do a bit of it in grade 9, and it's a really powerful thing because Thomas and I were having this conversation. If I know the price of 4 apples, it can be hard to figure out how much other apples are. Like 24 was kind of easy. What if it was 25? Ooh, that's a little bit trickier. What if it was 26? Ooh, that's a little bit trickier. But if you know the price of 1 apple, the unit rate, it's really easy to find any number of apples. You want 7 apples, you multiply by 7. You want 100 apples, you multiply by 100. Like it's super easy to find anything, right? So, at any rate, we don't have to worry about unit rates. Unit rates are very powerful. It's a great way of doing it. I'm going to show you. So no matter how you did it, you don't have to write this down because we're going to write it down and practice it a few times. I'm going to show you a surefire way that will always work, and it has a good thought process to it, and it's very reliable. We're going to do eventually some slightly harder questions than any that we're even going to see today or in the next week or so. And if you understand this and you could just kind of figure it out, you're like, it's $7.20, I got it. You don't need math class to help you. But once in a while, even though you might be good at this, you get a question that you can't wrap your head around. You're like, I don't get exactly what's happening. So that's where if you have a strategy like the one I'm about to show you to fall back on that will always work, that kind of just focuses your thinking, it can be really useful. So here's what I would do. I would say I start with the question, how much? So and I turn the words how much into X. So how much will it cost for 24 apples? And I say this in my head as I do it. Okay, so I write that down. I think about units. How much is money? And 24 is number of apples. Okay, so how much will it cost for 24 apples if it's $1.20 for 4 apples? So there's a couple of really important things that we did here. Dollars is on top in both cases. Absolutely must be. And number of apples is on the bottom in both cases. Absolutely must be. You can't flip-flop that crisscross. Do you understand? You cannot do that. So what I've done is I've taken these words, and all of you just used your common sense and your logic to figure out what was happening. You reasoned your way through it, but what I did is I turned it into a math equation. It's a special kind of equation. We call it a proportion. That's why we were talking about proportions today. Okay? And the nice thing about this is no matter how complicated your proportion is, you just use the same steps to always solve it. Does that make sense? So here's... and I always start with how much, so my X is on top. If my X was on the bottom, we're going to look at some examples. What do you do if your X is on the bottom? Because that does happen sometimes. You can still solve it. We actually saw that yesterday and the day before a little bit. But if you're setting up the proportion, you might as well set it up with X on top. Like, why wouldn't you? Because it's just easier. So I would recommend aiming for that. We start with x on top. How much for 24 apples? As long as you do that, x will be on top. Okay? And then make sure that you've got the right units on the top in both cases. So here's what you do. You multiply both sides by whatever is below the x. All we're doing is solving for x. We're isolating x, just like we've been doing over the last few days. It's not different. So I think about what my operation is, dividing by 24, okay? And I multiply both sides by 24. And what does that do? Well, 24 divided by 24, that's gone. And I get x equals, and so this is what all of you did, just in a different way, slightly different order. 1.2 times 24 divided by 4, which is 7.2. And then I interpret it. If you're asked in words, you answer in words. Like 7.2 is not an answer to the question, how much will 24 apples cost? 7.2. Imagine you were at like a grocery store or a corner store. They're like, how much does it cost for a pack of gum? And they were like, 0.85. That would just be weird. Like you might even understand it, but that would be really weird. They'd say 85 cents, right? So therefore it will cost $7.20. I'm just going to set this one up very similarly. I would do this. How many apples can I buy for $6 if I can buy 4 apples? And I always look back at the question when I'm doing this part. 4 apples costs $1.20. Exact same way. Multiply both sides by 6. And once you get familiar with solving it, again, it takes all the thinking out of it. You just do it. You go into automatic mode, makes it really easy. You fly through a quiz or a test when this is happening. Okay, so those are gone, and I get x equals 4 times 6 divided by 1.2. And if you did that one, how many people got 20 apples? You can buy 20 apples. That's not a very good summary statement. Summer? What's wrong? Nope. What's always it's not about what's always supposed to be on top. What I said was always put X on top. That's okay. In question A, you're right, it was money. But in question B, we were asking for how many apples. So if you use that skill, how much or how many, turn that into X, then you don't even need to worry about it. But watch, this is something I didn't talk about. In this case, it's how many apples can you buy for $6 if you can buy 4 apples for $1.2. So I kept it the same. That's what, even if your X is on the bottom, as long as it's the same, you can solve it. So but it's easier if you get X on top. Okay. You don't have to write down that saying. It just reminds us proportions, like I said, are just a specific type of equation. That's all it is. Okay? So so I want you to think about these as solving equations, not some kind of special thing where, oh, this is a proportion, I solve it differently. No, it's just an equation. Okay, so give that first one a try. Thomas. Yeah. Okay, somebody help me out. What do you do? How do you start this one? Taylor, what do I do? What do I do to get started? Not sure. What did we do in the last one? What did I? Are you trying to think? Yep. Multiply both sides by 3. Nice. So on the left side, watch if you want, right? If you're still trying to figure this out, watch instead of trying to write and copy everything down. 3 divided by 3, those are gone. Why are they gone? 3 divided by 3 is 1. So you end up getting 1 times x, but that's just x, right? Some people think that's magic. Like, the 3's disappeared. No, that's still math. 3 divided by 3 gave us 1, but that was why we did it, because it made it It made them cancel out, divide out. So now I wouldn't normally write this, but I get 7 times 3 divided by 5. Now that doesn't work out nicely. If you tried it, you don't get a nice, round, perfect answer. It's not really nasty, but you do get a decimal answer. So that's okay. Sometimes that happens. Hey, what's going on? What is it? Does anybody know what it is, Chrissy? 4.2. Awesome. How many people got 4.2? Yeah, good. Okay, next one. Ooh, what's different about this one? Yeah, the variable's on the other side. Does that change how we're going to solve it? No. Yeah, leave the variable over there. That's what I would do. But it doesn't really change how you solve it. Now, if you're setting up your own proportion, you can always put x on the left. And if that makes it easier for you because it's more familiar, do it. That's great. In fact, if you love the variable being on the left so much, you don't have to write this down, but you could just flip both sides. Do it. That's fine. You can do that. Just write the left on the right and the right on the left. That's fine to do. Okay, so what do I do for this one? Josh, what do you think I do?
Divide both sides by 1.5.
Divide?
Or multiply.
Nice. Because I'm already dividing, so we do the opposite. Very good. Okay, and the same thing. Those guys cancel. And I get 1.5 times 1 divided by 10. Which multiplying by 1 doesn't do anything, so I get 1.5 divided by 10, which is 0.15 equals A. Okay, one more. What's different about this one? Tamara, what do you think? Some of the numbers are bigger, absolutely. See how there's no right or wrong answer to that? Because that is true. And if that's what you notice, then that's great. Summer, what do you think? X is on the bottom. That's also different. And I said, we want to avoid that. But we didn't set this one up. Well, I did, but you didn't set this one up, right? So you didn't get to choose to put X on top. And that does happen sometimes. And there are some questions where even if you do set it up, you can't avoid it. But that's coming in a couple months, so we don't have to worry about that yet. But I do want you to have some skills about what you do when you get an X on the bottom like this. There's 2 strategies. I'm going to show you both. What do you think?
I was wondering, can you flip it over so the 2 bottom?
That's one of the strategies. Just flip them. Okay? So let's see what that one looks like. I'll do that one over here. Okay? And I do 2 different ways. So I just flip both sides. You have to flip both sides. If you think about a proportion like we set them up before, it makes sense why you can't just flip one side. Because this is like how much for 4 apples, if $8.1, for 100 apples, that does make sense. You can't just flip it, right? One side, but you can flip both. So that would become X over 4 equals 8.1 over 100. And then what would be my next step? Sam, what would I do? Yeah. No, multiply. You had it right the first time. Very good. Multiply both sides by 4. Doing the opposite. It's X divided by 4, so we do the opposite, divide or multiply. And X equals, what's 8.1 times 4 divided by 100? Ooh, 0.324. Weird. Yep. Instructions will typically tell you what to do. Round to 1 decimal place, round to 2 decimal places, something like that. Because there's no more decimal places after it, I'm inclined to just write all 3 down, like why not? If there's 10 decimal places, yeah, you're going to round to 1 or 2 decimal places or something, right? But in this case, I don't know, writing down 3 is fine. But questions will always tell you, so don't worry too much about that. What's the other strategy? So put your pencil down and just watch for a minute. The other strategy, and again, this is a skill that you need to have. You don't necessarily need it today, but down the road we will, is to clear out any fractions, you always can multiply, you have to multiply everything, okay? But when you're solving equations, you multiply by everything that's on the bottom, like everything kind of everywhere that's on the bottom. So here's what this would look like. I'm gonna write this down again. 4 over x equals 100 over 8.1. And I see some people have some ideas, and I bet I know what you're thinking. And what I'm doing is very similar to probably what you're thinking. I'm going to write it in a bit of a different way. But okay, so I'm going to multiply both sides by x and by 8.1. So I'm going to multiply both sides by x and by 8.1, by x and by 8.1. And I'm going to show it that way. And then watch what happens. This x on bottom gets rid of that guy. This 8.1 on the bottom gets rid of that guy. And I'm left with 8.1 times 4 equals 100 times x. So then all the bottoms are gone, and I'm left with just whatever's left on top. Like I scratched this out, so I'm left with just the 100 and the x. And I scratched this out, so I'm left with just the 8.1 and the 4. That might seem like a bit of a new way of doing it. Like that might seem a little complicated, or that's too complicated for this method. If you feel that way, that's fine. But once you do this a few times, it actually becomes really easy, and it's a good little trick. So then I would divide both sides by 100. And look, I get the exact same thing. 8.1 times 4 divided by 100. I got the same thing here. 8.1 times 4 divided by 100. 8.1 times 4 divided by 100. Same thing in both cases. And so you end up with 0.324 equals x. Yeah? You might think that's true. Yeah. In this case, you can. But I'm going to say two things about that. What's more complicated to you, for whatever reason, is simpler to somebody else. So it might seem more complicated, but believe it or not, other people are going to like that method better. And the method on the right, the reason why I'm showing you is because it will work in some cases where the method on the left doesn't. Some harder questions. I'll give you an example of one. X, Adam, you might recognize this, over x equals 7 over 2. Now I've got x on top and bottom. What do I do? If I flip it, I've still got x on the bottom. So we're not going to do any questions like this yet, but we will later. And in that case, you would need to know what's going on inside. But for today, I think you can get away with just flipping both sides, absolutely. Okay, we're going to do one more example. I want you to try example 3 here. I'm going to give you a minute to write it down and try it. And I'm going to ask that you try to write a proportion the way that we did in the way that I did it. So try that new method. Even if you think you have a method that works really well, that's great. But try this one at least once. So how far could a person jog in 40 minutes if, and then write that down. Okay? I'm going to give you a minute to try that. I want everybody to do it on a piece of paper. right, people are doing a good job with that. If you get set it up and solve it, that's great. And then if you get the first one done, do the second one too. What do you want to know?
Isn't it supposed to be kind of like do that thing?
Also could have, just to say accept different mark, it doesn't have to be, I'm not doing that. You want this way. If you want to just skip this out and start with that from the top.
And then put 25 on it.
Okay, so again, if you've already got it done, just watch. This is how I would do it. People did it in slightly different ways. A lot of people, it looked like, started with this, and it's not wrong. Don't get me wrong, it's not wrong. This is a common way of doing it. Where they go, okay, so 3 kilometers in 25 minutes. The only reason why this is a little bit tricky, if you start with this part that you're given in the question up here, when I do B, okay, so this is kilometers on top, I end up with 20 on top and X on the bottom. I'm doing the wrong question here, I know, but you see what I mean? So if you start with what you're given in the question, you might get X on the bottom. If I start with the question, how far, so that's distance, could the person jog in 40 minutes? So that's minutes. If they can jog distance on top 20, oops, sorry, no, that's the wrong part. Distance on top 3 kilometers in 25 minutes. So a lot of people got the same thing, but they had it flipped the other way around, which is fine. It's totally fine. Don't try to do it my way just because it's my way. Please, that's not what I'm saying. I just want to make sure that you understand all the different kinds of ways to do it. And then what do? You multiply both sides by 40. 40 divided by 40. And I get 3 times 40 divided by 25. What does that work out to, Taylor? 4.8. So what does that mean? How far can a person jog? 4.8 kilometers in 40 minutes. How long would it take this same person to jog 20 kilometers? So I'm going to start with the question. How long, so that's minutes, would it take to jog 20 kilometers if it takes 25 minutes to jog 3 kilometers? So I have kilometers on bottom in both cases and minutes on top, and I've got X on top and X on the left. But again, I mean, if you end up with X on the bottom, all you need to do is flip both sides. It's hardly any extra work. Like, I wouldn't erase what I have and redo it if I did. I would just rewrite it with the X on top, right? So it's not about right and wrong. It's just I want to make sure that you're thinking and actively making connections. Some people just go 3 over 25 X over 20. That's wrong, though. Because over here I've got kilometers on top, and over here I've got kilometers on bottom. Right? And so there's a disconnect in the thinking. They always do 3 over 25 because it's 3 and 25, and then they always just put X on top. So we're trying to avoid that. Okay, and so this one works out to X equals 25 times 20 divided by 3. Does anybody know what that is? Thomas? Okay, so 166, let's just say 0.7. That is minutes. So, I mean, I don't need to go more detailed than that. Any questions?